Hi everyone, welcome back to My Service Dog and Me. Today I want to talk a little bit about leash training, heeling, polite walking, what the difference is, how you're sabotaging your heeling training, stuff like that. Now before we jump into it, I want to of course make the quick side note that our foundations course is open for enrollment only until August 6th. So all that information is at the link in the description, and we just added a new bonus on this topic of leash walking. We're going to add a mini course right inside of the foundations course all about teaching polite walking and everything like that. So, the first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to heeling training, because this is definitely one of the things that we get the most questions about, and it's also one of the most challenging things to train a dog to do, is to heel under all circumstances, which is what we're expecting of our service dogs. Heeling requires 100% consistency 100% of the time. It doesn't matter what training methods you're using, what training equipment you're using, what trainers you're working with. If you're not being 100% consistent, you are never going to teach your service dog to heel. Okay? If you're not being 100% consistent, you are actively sabotaging your heeling training. This is really important to understand. And when I finally fully understood this problem, it changed the way that I taught heeling to my students. Because there's actually a lot that we can do about this, because consistency is certainly not my strong suit. And generally within the human race, the human species, 100% consistency is very hard for any of us to do. Because that means that whenever your dog is on a leash, they have to be learning to heel, and you have to be consistent, and you don't get any time off. So if your dog pulls during a bathroom break, for example, you might be sabotaging your heeling training. Now, before we get into this, I want to quickly talk about what heeling is when it comes to a service dog, because it is not the fancy obedience heel that you see them do in the obedience ring, in the competition ring, where they are basically touching their handlers, they're staring straight up at them. That is not what we're looking for in a service dog heel. In a service dog heel, we do want them close to the handler. I generally tell my handlers within a foot in every direction, but it changes a little bit depending on what equipment the handler is using, the size of the dog, things like that. The heeling behavior needs to be something that the dog can do for a very long time. And that behavior you see inside of a competition ring is not something that a dog can maintain for hours on end. Now, while we're working towards this goal of having a service dog who can heel all the time in all the places, there are 3 areas of life that you are most likely, or you could be, depending on your lifestyle, sabotaging your heeling training. So one is bathroom breaks. If you have to take your dog out to go to the bathroom on a leash, this is the most common place that I see handlers accidentally sabotage their dog's training, because they're allowing the dog out of heel position to go to the bathroom, they're allowing the dog to sniff, they're allowing the dog to move around freely. A lot of handlers are letting their dogs pull some. None of these things are things we can see during heeling for a service dog, but they are all things that are 1000% required during a bathroom break. Sniffing, moving freely, moving out of heel position. Daily walks are also a place that very often handlers are sabotaging their heeling training. Because our service dogs need exercise, they need freedom to be able to move freely and sniff freely and things like that, and they need heeling training. But unless you're being very intentional about how your daily walk is going with your dog, it is very unlikely that it's hitting any of those 3 things effectively. And we're going to come back to that here in a minute. And then the third place is simply whenever you're not in a headspace to be consistent, whenever you're not feeling well, whenever you're tired, whenever you're distracted by something else. If you aren't thinking about teaching your dog to heel, if you don't have the mental capacity to put the trainer hat on in that moment and be consistent with your heeling, then you are slowly sabotaging things. I know, because this is the one that happens to me the most. I have always been in the position where my dogs go out to go to the bathroom on a in a fenced-in area and have other exercise opportunities. So those were never really places where I am susceptible to sabotaging my own heeling training. But this one, not being in the headspace to be consistent, this is the one that gets me. So what do we do about this, right? So now that I've showed you these 3 places it's likely that you are sabotaging your heeling training, if any of that applies to your lifestyle, What do we do about this? Because there's actually a lot that we can do. But before we move on, I really need you to understand something. I need you to understand you probably cannot just go do this with your dog, what I'm about to explain. You and your dog need skills in order to do them safely. So we're going to talk about a few things here for a minute. And it's important that you understand that safety is always our number one priority. Safety for you and your dog. So your dog may not be a good candidate for a couple of these things right now, and that's okay because you can get there if you want to. So we're going to do this by breaking our walks into categories. So first we have exercise, okay? Our dogs need exercise. The amount and type of exercise they need is going to vary greatly based on breed, age, and the individual dog. But 90% of the time, walking on a leash next to you is not really going to count as physical exercise. For physical exercise, our dogs really need to get their heart pumping. So they need to be playing fetch or tug of war or swimming or running or playing with other dogs or biking or jogging or something that gets them moving more. So they need to be at least in that trotting motion, not in the walking motion. So if you have a very small dog who can trot next to you as you walk, then it probably is exercise, but otherwise, putting your dog on a 6-foot leash and going for a walk is very unlikely to be checking the exercise column if you have a dog under the age of 2. So we're going to call exercise its own thing, and I have a YouTube video on the channel about the exercise formula, so I will make sure that we link that below. Now, the second type of walk is heeling training. So this is where you are very specifically working on heeling training. The quality of that heel is going to vary greatly based on age and experience level of your dog, right? So an 8-week-old puppy's heeling training session, well, first of all, I probably wouldn't be doing heeling with a puppy. I'd be doing the next thing we're going to talk about with a puppy. But a young dog's heeling training is going to look very different than an experienced dog's heeling training. Because heeling takes a very long time for our dogs to really master. But heeling training is its own kind of thing, right? That's its own separate type of walk. And then third, we have casual walks, which we can break down into freedom walks and loose leash casual walks. So we have this third category of walks here, where our dogs are able to behave more like a pet dog. They don't have to be in heel position. They can sniff the ground. They can go to the bathroom. They can move around freely within the bounds of their leash. And this is how we protect our heeling training, is by separating these types of activities out for our dog so that they know what they are, what is expected of them when. So how do we do this? How do we separate things out for our dogs? Okay, by making the difference clear, the cues and the criteria, making these things very clear for our dog. When they are doing a casual walk, when they're allowed to sniff the ground and move more freely, and when they are when they're expected to heel. But like we already said, heeling takes time. So what that's going to look like on a little dog, a young dog, is going to be very different than how it looks on an advanced dog. But we want to make things clear, okay? The difference needs to be clear to our dogs in both the cues and the criteria. So here's what I mean by that. The cue is the thing that tells the dog what kind of walk they're on, okay? I am not a huge fan of using verbal cues for this particular behavior because I find handlers struggle to be consistent and clear with it. We're going to talk about that here in a second. And then criteria is that we just need to make sure that the expectations for how our dog is supposed to behave is also very clear. So here's how we're going to do that, or how we do it in our program. In our program, if the dog is on a collar or a gentle leader, we are doing heeling training, okay? Very specifically teaching the dog how to do the service dog heel. If we have the dog on a harness, that automatically means that we're doing some type of casual walk. This means they're allowed to sniff. This means they're allowed to greet people. The puppy in the picture on that slide is wearing a harness because he had to be attached to a leash, but we were in a casual situation. This was my in-law's back patio. Like, he doesn't need to be acting like a service dog, but he did need to be on a leash. So by putting him on a harness, I protect his heeling training, because that cue, the harness itself, is the cue that tells the dog, you can sniff, you can move around freely, you can greet people, all of those types of things. And then the third thing is that if we have a long line and the harness, this is where we're doing a freedom walk. And a freedom walk, let me explain these three things to you so you understand what I'm talking about here. Heeling training, which I just see now that I spelled wrong. Autocorrect always tries to make it healing like that, the type where we're healing a physical body. But you know what that's supposed to say. So heeling training is, like I said, we're actively teaching the dog to heel. A casual walk is one in which the dog is allowed to move within the bounds of their 6 feet, sniff freely, greet freely, etc. A long line in a harness is where we're actually in more of like a park setting, and I'm following my dog around and letting him move far more freely on a long line. This requires a lot of skills for you to be able to do safely. If your dog currently pulls or ignores you or is excitable or difficult to deal with around distractions, this is not a safe option for you and your dog at this time, but you can get there if you want to. So the freedom walk meets our dog's needs for freedom, to be able to make choices, to be able to move freely and sniff freely. The casual walking with a harness and a 6-foot leash, this is how I'm going to do things like go to the vet if I'm not feeling like doing heeling training. This is how I'm going to do bathroom breaks if the dog is going to the bathroom on a leash. This is how we're going to do that daily walk around the block. Now, there's a very important piece to all of this, and that is in all three of these, there is no pulling. So you don't move forward on a tight leash, and the dog should be responsive to the handler's cues. So I don't particularly care whether you're doing a heeling training session, a casual walk, or a freedom walk. Pulling is never a part of that picture. So we do have to go through a training process to teach our dogs not to pull, right? So in our foundations course, like I said, we added this bonus. We're going to go through a mini course, and we're really going to nail casual walking and freedom walking. And then heeling is something we hit in our academy, because heeling really is an advanced behavior. Whereas casual walks and freedom walks are just a part of daily life and important foundation skills. Now, the important piece to those, though, like I was just saying, is that in all three of those scenarios, if the leash goes tight, you have to stop moving and not move forward if the leash is tight, because regardless of the type, again, the type of methods you're using, the type of equipment you're using, or the trainers that you're working with, if your dog pulls and you move forward, you are actively teaching them to pull, okay? So the question then, of course, is how are we going to get started with this? Because this is a big topic. But how do you get started? So first, I want you to remember that safety always comes first, okay? So while we do have a list of skills your dog needs to learn, things like what to do, things like leash cues, things like focus, things like certain cues, emergency behaviors, etc. Safety is always going to be our top priority. So if your dog would pull you over on a harness, then we need to figure something out until we teach your dog how to walk politely on a harness. So safety often comes down to three things, okay? Choosing the correct equipment for your dog at this time, choosing the correct environment to walk your dog in, and third, making sure that your dog has all the prerequisite skills necessary to safely do the casual walk or the freedom walk. Now, second, we need a certain level of responsiveness around distractions. Now, your dog doesn't have to have perfect focus in order to learn how to do casual walks or freedom walks, but we do have to have a certain level of responsiveness in order to be able to do this safely. So I'm going to link in the description below the video to our Engage, Disengage video, which is my favorite exercise for getting started on building focus and responsiveness around distractions. That is a great exercise for that. And then third, you have to learn to stop when your dog pulls. You have to be able to be consistent with that, and you and your dog have to be able to do that together safely so that when he pulls and you stop, he also stops. And that's something that usually has to be taught. So as you've seen here, this is a big topic, which is why we've added that bonus to our foundations course. So if you have any questions, the best place to ask them is going to be in our Facebook group, Train Your Service Dog with Confidence. You can find all this stuff in the description below. Our foundations course does close at 11:59 on August 6th. So if you're interested in joining that and taking advantage of our mini course on polite walking, you're going to want to jump in before then. You can find all the information about that at the link in the description below. Healing and polite walking, there's a lot of overlap, but they are two separate things. And they are both big, big topics that that many people lump into basic obedience or foundation training, and there's really nothing basic about teaching your dog to heel. But being able to safely walk your dog so that he can sniff and go to the bathroom and move around and practice training in places like parks and parking lots and stuff like that, that is an important foundation skill. That is something we all want to be working on. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in our free Facebook group, Train Your Service Dog with Confidence, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.